Okay, so this is part 2 to building our snack shack or bar shed. So now that we've got our two ends here, two 2x4s that are 96 inches and long and 96 inches apart, we are going to make a new sketch. So we're going to go once again to sketch, and we could do one of two things. We could either go off of the top of one of our 2x4s, or since we pulled them down off the top plane, we could go off the top plane. But I think in this case, I'm just going to go off of, because it's a good habit to get into, not having to rely on planes as you move through a drawing. I'm going to go off of the face of beam 1 is where we're going to go and base our sketch off of. And so we are going to draw a line, and I'm going to make it go from that point to that point. Escape. And escape does not work when I'm doing this. I'm going to right click, escape line. So I clicked, I attached it to the corner of this 2x4 and the corner of this 2x4. Okay, so now I'm going to start going, and I'm going to want one on the opposite end, obviously. So I'm going to click line tool again, and I'm going to come and attach it to. So if you hover over a point and it lights up and gets a box around it, that is letting you know that if you click on there, you're going to constrain whatever you're drawing to that point. And so I'm going to do the same thing over here around that corner, light it up, click, and then I'm going to escape the line tool. And now I have these two lines on the ends. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to draw another line. I'm going to light up the edge of the 2x4, click. Now notice it just lit up the edge. It didn't have a box. That's because it wasn't constraining a point to a point. It was constraining a point to a line. So I could slide this piece up and down the line if I wanted to. And then I'm making sure that it is lighting up. It's lighting up, what do you call it? So it's a yellow and blue dots on that line, meaning that it is perfectly horizontal. I'm going to get out of there, escape my line, and I'm going to now figure out how I want to set this up. I'm going to make this one 16 inches on center from the outside here. And so to do that, I'm going to go and use my dimension tool, and I'm going to make this from here to here 16. Hit enter, and so now I have that 16 inches. Now I want to, I could go and just draw a bunch of these lines, but that takes up extra time. So I'm going to use my linear pattern tool. So that's this up here that looks like 4 squares. So I'm going to click on that. And then I'm going to click on this line, which is the line I want to make linear. Now it defaults to having a linear pattern along the x-axis, which is right to left. And I don't want that. So that's what this 3 is here, 3 times. So I'm going to double click on that, and I'm just going to make that 1, hit enter. And so now it's only giving me 1 that direction. But I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to make it, I'm not sure how many it's going to be. I'm just going to try 5 to start with. And so it's putting them, I have 5 lines now, and they're right now 1 inch apart. I want to go the other direction, so I'm going to double click on the distance apart, and I'm going to make it -16. Really, I should have worked from the bottom, and then I could have just called it 16. But I do that, hit enter, and honestly, that looks about right. I've got one that's going right through my point of origin, through the x and y of 0, which is exactly what I want, because we're going to have sheathing going across there. And then if anytime you have this where it's like a little mouse with a green check on the button that's next to your cursor, if you take that out into space and click on it, it'll finalize whatever function you're doing. So in this case, the linear patterns. I'm going to use my dimension tool again. This is totally unnecessary. You don't have to do this. I'm just doing it to illustrate the point and make sure I did this right. if I look here, I now have that at 16 inches. So I've got it 16 inches on center going all the way across and 16 inches from the outsides. Okay, now I'm going to do a green check. And we're going to have to do 3 beam tool functions here to make this work. And so honestly, I probably could have gone 24 inches on center, but since we're using 2x4s on this, I figure we're going to make it a little sturdier. And so when the party people on there gain a little bit of weight, they're not going to fall through the floor. Okay, so we're going to go up here to the beam tool again, and I'm going to start with one of the outside beams. In this case, I'm just going to select the first one here. And once again, it's set for 2x4. If we were go and rotate it around, though, we can see that it is sitting on its side, so we don't want that. So we're going to go up to our angle, make it 90 degrees, hit enter. And now it is 90 degrees, same direction as the others, but I'm going to have to take that arrow and pull it down so it's flush with the others, and I want to pull it in. So I'm going to pull it in there, and then green check. So now if you go and you look, I'm getting myself an isometric view here. You can see I've got that 2x4 there. I'm going to get back to a top view. Now, got a problem. My sketch disappeared. Okay, so whenever you use a sketch to do something like an extrusion or use the beam tool, it will make itself invisible. But if I highlight over sketch 2, it lights it up there, you can see. So it's a little eyeball with a line through it. We're going to click it again, so now we can see our sketch again. Okay, so now I'm going to the beam tool again, and I'm going to do all of the center beams, or we could do the outside, doesn't matter. But as I said, we're going to have to make 3 beam functions here. So I'm clicking first one, second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one. Once again, I'm going to need to rotate these guys 90 degrees. Enter. So now they're vertical. Now, if you look at them, they are centered. I'm going to get back to a top view. They are centered on the lines, and that's what we want because we want them 16 inches on center. Remember, those lines are 16 inches apart. But the problem that we're going to run into, hang on just a second, the problem we're going to run into is you see they're sticking up like that, so we're going to need to pull them down. So we're going to take that arrow that's pointing up, and we're just going to pull it down till they're flush with the others. And then we're going to hit a green check and conclude this beam there. Yes, question? You're not centered? Okay, if your beams are not centered on the line, you drug them one direction or the other. Where? So here?
So I have the beam 1 for the 2x4.
Uh-huh.
And then I got beam 2 for the top. And then all the others.
Beam 2x4 for the top. So I have beam 1 is this first one here.
Yeah,
okay, then I have beam 2 is this piece here. Yeah, so that one has to be different than the ones in the center, and the reason being is the ones on the center we want centered on our line, and the one on the top we want pulled to the inside of our line. And that's also the reason why I didn't do both of the outside lines at the same time, because if I did both the outside lines at the same time, okay, I'm going to go up to the top view here. If I did this 2x4 at the same time I did this 2x4 at the bottom here, and I pulled this one down to make it on the inside of this line, it would make it on the outside of that line, so it would be outside our frame. So we have to do them in 3 separate operations. Did that help? So if you want to get rid of, so let's say that you put all the center pieces in beam 2. You're going to double click on beam 2 again. I'm going to do it in beam 3 so you can look at it, look up at the screen. So I'm going to go double click beam 3, and then see how I have each of these. There's a little X there. You can get rid of those. So see, they light up as you hover over them on there. So like, let's say I wanted to get rid of this one. I didn't want that. I could just see how I'm hovering over it, and it's lighting that one up on my screen. That last cross member is lit up on my screen. I click on that and then it goes away. I want to bring it back and I just click on it again and now it is back and correct. For which one? Beam 2, you're pulling in. Beam 3, you're leaving centered but pulling it down. Here we go. So now for this last beam, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get beam tool again. And I'm going to click on this last line. And I'm going to rotate this around a bit. Oh, I got to make it 90, rotate it 90 degrees. So I'm going to hit that 90 degrees, enter. Stands it up for me. I'm going to pull it down so it's flush with everything else. I'm going to go back to a top view here. And if you can see, if you see here, it's not like it's centered on there like the middle ones are. I don't want that, so I'm pulling it in. So now we have our floor framing done. And I'm going to hit the green check. Now our floor framing's done. Okay. So all the floor framing's done, and then we are going to, let me think about this for a second here. Okay, I want to turn Sketch 2 back off again, because remember how Sketch 2 made itself invisible after we used it for the first time? The more sketches you have turned on, the more cluttered it is later on when we're trying to do things, because you end up grabbing the wrong thing by accident. We can always turn it back on if we need it later. So for now, we're going to go hide Sketch 2. Because we don't need it anymore. We've already used it to make an extrusion. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and at this point make a composite part so that this floor frame is one piece that we can use in our drawings later on. So I'm going to, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to my drop down where default shows a plane. But when I drop down, the very bottom option is the composite part. Depending on the size of your screen, you may need to scroll down to find it there, but I'm going to drop down, select composite part. It wants to know what entities. I'm just going to highlight everything we've got right now. You could click on things individually, but right now we're putting everything we have together. And then I'm going to name this floor framing and go green check. You need me to do that one more time? I do have another video on there that's specifically on how to make composite parts, or you can replay this. It's not crucial that you do it at this point. It just makes it easier. If I didn't want to go and highlight everything, I'm just going to undo that real quick here, everything that I've selected. But let's say that we're doing a drawing where I've got a bunch of other things and I can't just drag and select everything. I could go and just do what I'm doing right now and select each item individually. As you can see, it's just more time consuming, but I accomplish the same thing. And green check. And so the nice thing about a composite part, if we come down here, I got this little thing is kind of in my way. If we come down here, I've got the composite part listed, and I can go and turn pieces off and on. So I click on that and it all disappears. I click it there, it comes back. And so later on when we're doing drawings, that can be helpful. So let's put the floor on next. Okay, so we're going to do another drawing. So we're going to go and do a sketch again. And anywhere on the surface of any one of these beams, we can select as our sketch plane. And so I think, didn't we talk about we're going to use sheathing for the inside, and we're going to use some sort of like 2x4s or 2x6s or something like that on the outside, right? Pardon? Right now? No. Right now I went to sketch. Well, here, I'll exit out again and do it one more time. I go to sketch. And then I'm going to select the face of one of these beams. So face of beam 2 is what I selected. Okay, so now we're going to take and just do a corner rectangle. So we come up here to a rectangle. We're going to click on it. and I'm going to select this top corner and anchor it there, and I'm going to drag it out. I'm going to see if this will work to light up that center point. Yeah, see, it did. See, I lit up that center point, and now if I drag this over that center point, it should light it up, and well, it picks the center point of this. So I'm going to go and I'm going to constrain it to the bottom there. Light, see, I've lit it up on the bottom, and then we got that box around there. That box is lighting up the center point. I don't know if you can see that. Let me try and zoom in a little bit closer so you can see better what I'm doing here. If I zoom in here and let me find it, see, the little box lights up around my cursor. That is lighting up the center point, and it has a center point, which is that little line with a dot in the middle of it. Constraint. I don't know if icon's the right word for it, but the little symbol, I guess symbol, shows up underneath. And so that's saying that I am anchoring the other side of this rectangle to the center point of the outside of that 2x4. Now, we know what size is a sheet of plywood. 4x8, good. So 4x8, so we know this is 8x8. So if I'm anchoring it to the center point there, we know that I'm putting a 4x8 sheet there. So I green check, and it should, as it finishes computing, turn everything to black, which means that all dimensions are defined. I shouldn't have to do anything else. Let's see. Yeah, give it a second. If yours showed up as blue, then you've got to constrain it to something. Mine, it took a second to turn on me. But so now I have a rectangle here that's the size of a standard piece of sheathing. And you know what, I guess we'll go ahead and use the same sketch to lay out the boards that we're going to go and put on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and use a line tool, and I'm going to go from the top corner on the left side to the bottom corner of the left side. Okay, and then yes, that was the line tool. I went from the top corner of the left side, anchored it there, to the bottom corner of the left side and anchored it there. So I have a line there. Now, this is a case where it's nice to have that composite part, because honestly, those 2x4s right now are cluttering the view up for me, I feel. So I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to turn off the parts, because we don't need them now for this sketch. Then I'm going to go and come up and select my linear pattern. Okay, so do you guys want to use 2x4s or 2x6s for the deck? 2x6s, you think? Okay, so 2x6 is what, 5 3/4 inches, I believe, or is it 5.5 inches? I'm having a brain fart. Wide. Let's see. 2 by... Yeah, 5.5. So it's 5.5 inches. How much was, so let's see, we maybe put like a 1/4 inch space in between each of them to allow some expansion contraction. Does that sound about right? So then we would put 5 3/4 inch spacing between these lines. So we're going to go and use our linear pattern tool, which is up here. We're going to select that. We're going to click on here, and we're going to find the spacing, which is down here. Kind of hard to see unless you zoom way in. That's that 1 inch. I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to make that 5.75. Hit enter. So now we start playing with how many we want to put across here. Right now we got 3. We need more than that. So let's go Maybe try now more than 6, 8. That looks about right. So we're going to do that. So we're going to make 8 of them. So we're going to have 8, which are spaced 5.75 apart. Okay, 8 lines, 5.75 apart, and they're heading to the right towards this rectangle that we did. Okay, then we're just going to click off and space. Once again, remember, anytime we have that mouse with the little green check mark on the button, we can just click anywhere in space and it'll finalize that function. So in this case, we finalized our linear pattern. And then we're going to go with a green check. And we have our sketch. So we're going to have to do a couple things here. For the piece of plywood, we don't have a beam tool that has plywood in there, so we're just going to do a simple extrusion. So we're going to come up here to extrude, and we are going to just select this rectangle as the face to extrude. We're probably going to use 3/4 inch plywood on the floor, or yeah, I believe that it's 3/4 inch the OSB that we're going to use for that. So we're going to put 0.75 for our thickness, and we're going to look and make sure that it is heading up, which it is. See, you've got the arrow going up. We can switch that direction by going like that, or by pulling that arrow, but right now it's going up. That's what we want, and we want to make sure it says new, and we're going to go green check. What? With the 8 lines? Okay, you hit the green check already?
Yeah.
Okay, so you come back up here to extrude. Here, I'll undo. So we do it again. So extrude up here. See where you find extrude?
Yeah.
Okay, so we click on extrude, and then you have to click the parts to extrude. So we're clicking this, that part there. And we want to make sure the arrow's pointing up. It should default up, but sometimes, depending on what you've done in the past, it might not. We're making it 0.75, and click off of that. So now it should be 3/4 of an inch going up, and we're going to go green check. Yes?
Why does it delete where the plane lines when you extrude that? It's deleted a whole like line. Look.
Let me see.
It's right there.
Oh, all right. So you may need to, depending, let's see if mine did that too. Okay. So there was a drawing there. It was the 2x4 that was already there. And so it created a boundary so that we weren't expecting. So I'm going to go turn sketch 3 back on, which we have to do anyway. I'm going to double click on extrude. And so we had clicked on this surface area. We're also going to have to click on that little section there, and it will make it a solid piece. Sometimes, what? So I'm going to I'll do undo and do it one more time. So I'm going back into extrude 1. I'm double clicking on it to get back into it. Anytime you have anything in this menu here, you double click on it, it'll bring you back into it. And then I'm going to go and click on that little area that did not extrude already and add that to the extrusion. Sometimes when it's got like artificial boundaries in there, it thinks that it's a different shape, and it'll pick that up when you're using the extrusion tool. It's not perfect. So sometimes you've got to go in there and click a couple of different spots to make that happen. Okay, so I'm going green check. And so now I've got my floorboard for the inside of this place. And I'm going to go get back on the top view. Next, I'm going to use a beam tool. So I'm coming back to a beam tool. We still have timber and lumber selected, but now we're going to go to a 2x6. And I'm going to select each of these lines. Two by six, yes. And so I'm going to need to go and grab this arrow and pull them that direction. And I'm going to look from the bottom, and I'm going to need to pull them up. So if you look at it, they're centered this way, so I'm going to also pull them up. Nope, because this time we want them to lay flat like that because they're a floor. So we're going to leave that alone. And so now if you look, we have our 2x4 floor, which is where they're spaced 1/4 of an inch apart on each of them. We also have this gap right here in front. I think that's something that we can kind of fill in with some trim when we actually build the shed. We're going to go ahead and leave that gap in there for now. So now we're going to go and take and we're going to make this. We're going to first green check. So now we've got our floors done. You can look at it here from kind of a top isometric type view. I think we should make a composite part that is the floor. So what we're going to do for that, we're going to come back up here to our composite part. So we're going to get our drop down here, select composite part, and we are going to, let's see, is there supposed to be a what? Between the floor and these? There's going to be, if we're going to have 1/4 of an inch spacing, so we could do one of two things to fix that. We could either add to the spacing and make the spacing a little farther apart between the deck boards, or we fill it with a piece of trim when we build it. I think that I don't really want to space the deck boards further than 1/4 of an inch. That's pretty standard. You get wider than that and you start dropping stuff through it and all. So we're going to go ahead and I think leave it that. We'll fill it with a piece of trim board later on after we put the siding on. It'll give us space for the siding and all. And then if we still have a gap after we've trimmed it, then we'll add to it. So we're going to go ahead and with our composite tool in, select all here by dragging over it, selecting it, green check. Now we've got another composite part. And I'm going to come back down here and I'm going to turn composite part 1 back on just so you can see how it all fits together here. So now we've got our floor sitting on top of our framing down here. See how that works there? Nice. And so it automatically gives you default colors. Just like down here, I've got blue 2x4s, and I've got later on one of the last steps, I'll show you how you can change the color of the different timbers. So like when we go and do what you look like you're mind blown that we can. Yeah, so you can change the colors. So if you look at some of the other drawings that I've done, like where I've drawn a trailer, I make it all black, or the last shed, the shed that we drew for last year, I made it white with blue trim. So, and I made all the timber kind of this brownish color to be like a wood color. So yeah, you can change all the colors up and all that stuff. So I'll show you guys how to do that later on. That'll be one of the last steps. See all the sketches? Which side? Turn it on or off? Like the parts? Down here, did you make composite parts? So then if you made composite parts, you're going to come down here to the bottom left, and the composite part menu default is, here, let me get this little thing out of the way. The composite part menu is default collapsed like that, so you'll click that little like arrow thingy, and it opens it up. And so like, let's say I want to hide the framing, I just click on the framing one. Let's say I want to hide the floor, I click on the floor and it disappears. And I'm actually going to come up here and I'm going to hide sketch 3. Okay, so, okay. All right, thanks for watching. This was part 2 of the Snack Shack video series.